Biodiversity. Bio means life, and diversity means differences or variety. So when we look at biodiversity, we're looking at the variety of different types of life within an area. There are two ways we can measure biodiversity. One way is by looking at the diversity of genes within a species. So we're looking at genetic diversity within the same species. So for example, if we look at dogs, there's the one species of dog, but there's a lot of different breeds. That provides a lot of genetic diversity. You've got the Chihuahua, Beagle, Rottweiler. And then look at people, for instances. We are all the same species, yet we have a lot of genetic diversity, different eye color, hair color, skin color, heights, things like that. And then there's the things that you can't see, such as our blood types. So there's different types of blood. You could have A blood, B blood, AB blood, or you could have type O. You can't look at a person and know their blood type, and yet that is a genetic diversity. Now, if you have a lot of genetic diversity within a species, that's a very good thing. It provides a lot of different disease resistance. So let's say that there is a disease that wipes out anybody that has type B blood or the B allele in it. So then that means it would go wipe out anybody with type B and anybody with type AB. But did it wipe out the entire human population? No, because you still have people with type A and type O who would be alive. That's why your genetic diversity is so important, because it keeps a species going even if there's a disease that can wipe out part of the population. The other way you measure biodiversity is by the different types of species, or the number of different species within an ecosystem. So instead of looking within a species, like with genetic diversity, now we're looking at many different species. We're looking at how many different types of flowers, different types of grass, different types of birds and insects and things like that. So you're looking at a number of different species. So the reason genetic diversity makes an ecosystem strong is like what I was just saying. The greater the variety or variation, the greater chance of survival in a new environment. So let's look at a real life example. So I know this picture is kind of blurry, but here is a mouse. It's the same species. One is a yellow color and one is black. Now, which one is going to blend in better with the rock? The top one. This one blends in better with the rock because it's the same color. So it's going to be less likely to get eaten by its predator. The black one on the bottom can be seen easier, so it's more likely to get eaten by things. Now, the environment is consistently changing. So in this example, there is a volcanic eruption, and all of the ash caused the rock by the nearby area to become darker. Now, which mouse can be seen easier? Well, now the light-colored mouse can be seen easier, so it's more likely to be eaten, while the darker one is more camouflaged. So this genetic diversity within the same species help to make sure that even with the environmental changes, that there's still part of the species that could go on living and continue on the race or species. So now that's just explaining the same thing. This is a brain break. If you want to find the 8 differences, you can pause and do that now. This one is a little bit harder to do, but I can go ahead and show them to you. So if you're wanting to look for them, then go ahead and pause. But your differences, there is a triangle on the flag here, but not on the top one. The door on the lighthouse. You have the splashes with the drink. You have these little things from the umbrella. You've got the part of the ship, and then you have differences in your cloud coverage right here. Then you have the difference in the baseball cap and the sand dunes back there. So there's your 8 differences. So why is biodiversity so important? This top line is really the most important, or the biggest deal to know. It brings stability to an ecosystem. The more variety there is, the more likely that ecosystem can continue on if it changes. So if you have 8 types of grass, and you have, think about all the different bugs and animals that eat that grass. If one type of grass dies, it's not a big deal. The ecosystem can continue going on because there's 7 other kinds of grass that the bugs and animals can eat. But if there's only one type of grass and that died, then all of those bugs and animals that ate that would be in a lot of trouble. So the more variety, the more stability, because small changes won't have as big of an impact as it would if there were fewer things there. It also is going to meet a lot of human needs. The more variety there is, the more stuff there is for us to use, and it has the potential to improve medicine. We use a lot of medicine that we get from things like the tropical rainforest because it is one of the most diverse places on the earth. So plants, animals, and climate, they all work together to balance things out, and biodiversity just creates more of a balance in when there's change. Threats to biodiversity. This is what we're going to be looking at now. You have habitat loss, fragmentation, and degradation. So when we do urbanization, which is building up cities, we tend to alter the habitat a lot. We cut down trees and things like that, and that's what is habitat loss, and that can cause a lot of organisms to die, which makes severe biodiversity go down. So habitat loss is the biggest threat to biodiversity. So I'm going to make sure we put a big star there because that's the most important thing to know from here. Habitat loss makes the biggest threat to biodiversity. When you have habitat loss, organisms can't adapt fast enough to the big drastic change that was. Imagine if you lost from where you lived, you lost your entire house and everything in it. That would be a huge change and a huge struggle to overcome. And that's what's going on when we cut down trees. Those animals lose everything, and it's very hard for them to recover after that. For example, if we lose our coral reefs due to ocean acidification, that's going to have drastic impacts for the ocean because this is such a diverse place. It will have huge impacts. Habitat fragmentation. This is when we cut habitats up into little chunks. So as you can see in this picture, it's when you build streets and roads and stuff. So it's like a road going straight down the middle of a deer's habitat. But people complain about how deer will jump out in the middle of the road and cars hit them. Well, imagine if you had a highway going through the middle of your couch or your living room. The only way to get from your couch to the kitchen is to cross the highway. There'd be a greater chance that you'd get hit as well. So that is why it's such a big deal to animals. It creates what we call an edge effect. So say there's a plant that likes very shady areas. It doesn't like a lot of sunlight. Well, if you cut down all the trees, it will then be exposed to sunlight. So it can have big effects with your plants as well. Habitat degradation is when you degrade a ecosystem with pollution. It can be pollution you can easily see, such as trash, or it can be pollutants we can't see as well, such as your carbon dioxide or your water pollution, like toxic metals, or the land pollution is more going to be your trash. But that has obvious bad effects to the environment. Next, we are going to go on to how humans reduce biodiversity. Well, we reduce biodiversity a lot by urbanization because we cut down the trees and we replace different land with our buildings and concrete, so that's going to do habitat loss. We also have the habit of hunting a species to extinction. So people will, all want a particular animal's fur to make fur jackets, or they will want the tusk of an elephant or a rhino because they're worth a lot of money. And so people will hunt that animal until there are none left. And then pollution, obviously humans create a lot of pollution in the environment. But we also can do something called, we introduce what we call an invasive species, which we'll talk about in a moment. So an invasive species is a species that is not from a particular area. That's when we say it's not native to that zone. For example, kudzu. Kudzu is a plant that is originally from Japan. People went to Japan, saw kudzu, and were like, this is a pretty vine. It could help prevent erosion in the U.S., and it also could look pretty at houses. So people got kudzu, brought it over, and it started growing at an exponential rate. It started growing so quickly because there was no predator in the area that ate kudzu. It had no natural predator. So nothing could keep it in check. Plants and animals have a check and balances type system. You have predator-prey because the predator will keep the prey from overpopulating. And so eventually an invasive species, because it has no predator, it can grow out of control and take over the area and eventually take over the niche of your species that are from that area. So just a couple of examples are going to be your python. Your kudzu, you can see in the bottom right. You may see kudzu still if you're driving along highways. What they did to get the kudzu under control is they introduced snails. So they brought another species from Japan over that naturally ate kudzu, these little snails, and they put them on the kudzu to help manage it. But then you also have zebra mussels as well. So if you have too much invasive species or habitat loss, degradation, anything like that, then you can have what we call extinction, meaning that the species disappears. All of them end up dying. Before animals become extinct, such as the dodo bird, species become endangered, which means their numbers are so low that they are on the verge of becoming extinct. If this happens, then we do have things that try to help protect against that. The Endangered Species Act. This was put in place in the 70s, and it just helps to protect the land and the animals who are close to becoming extinct. Now, with your invasive species, these are all different examples of invasive species. There is a video. If you click on Introduce Species, it's the same thing. This is a link to a video that goes over the top 10 most interesting invasive species. It's very quick, but it is interesting if you watch it. It's got the impact that it has as well. So I hope you do check that out just to learn a little bit more about them. But that is it for this video and for this unit.